Welcome everyone, and today we are learning Riverpod. Riverpod is an anagram of provider, which means it is provider but also different, and it's created by the same package creator of provider. He also created Riverpod, and Riverpod has some advantages over provider in the sense that Riverpod doesn't depend on Flutter, so it means that you do not pass around your build context all over, and also Riverpod is support multiple providers and is compulsive, which means that you will not see the provider not found exceptions with Riverpod. And it also comes with a little bit of improved performance and caching system, and also has the ability to auto dispose your providers when not used anymore. In case you do not understand what provider is, that's fine. All you need to know is that provider provides a place where you can access shared state or data, and it allows you to access that state in multiple locations. And also providers are a total replacement for patterns like singletons, service locators, dependency injection, or your inherited widget. Providers come in many variants, and we will take a deep dive to look at the many variants of providers and the notifiers that Riverpod provides. The providers are the provider itself, the state provider, the stream provider, the feature provider, and also the notifiers, which is the ChangeNotifier Provider, the StateNotifier Provider as well. Using Riverpod in your application is quite straightforward. All you have to do is to install the dependency and install the equivalent one for your project. If you want to decide to use Flutter plus Flutter hooks, all you need to do is to install Flutter hooks and hooks Riverpod, add them to your prospect.yaml file, and you're good to go. But the purpose of this tutorial, we are going to be working with the Flutter Riverpod package only, and we'll be using the version 0.1 to the 1 as at the time of recording this video. Okay, so I have created a simple application here that shows the different types of providers that we are going to be looking at, and you can see them. Each one of these buttons takes you to a widget, and also we have the notifiers that we are going to be looking at. The structure of my project is quite straightforward. I have the main file, I have the UI also here, and also the widget which refers to each one of the providers here. Also on the home.darts, these are the buttons, and then the main.darts, where I reference the home screen as well. The first thing you want to do is to install Flutter Riverpod 0.12.1 in your prospect.yaml file, and then you have to go to your root widget, which is your my app widget, and wrap this with provider scope. So what is provider scope? Provider scope stores the state. It's a widget that stores the state of your providers, so you have to provide it to the roots of your widget. Okay, so we are going to be starting with the first provider, which is the most simplest one. So go to your UI folder and go to provider. Now what we want to do here is to provide this hello world, and if you click on the provider, you see the hello world here. So how do you do that? We will declare a global string provider. It is immutable, and it's more like a function, and we will pass in the provider object, and which is of type string, since we are trying to pass around the hello world. It's going to take the ref argument, and then it's going to return the hello world string. Yes. And also we are going to replace the stateless widget with a consumer widget, which is also a stateless widget, but it allows us to listen to a provider so that the UI can automatically update the components when needed. So we are going to also pass a scoped reader here, and we call it watch. Okay, and if you want to listen, you just have to declare a variable and pass in the watch and the provider itself, which is the hello world provider. And here we are just going to pass in the text that we have declared here. And when you save that, then you have hello world. To see the changes, you need to hot reload your hot restart your app, and when you click on it, it will reflect. Let's test that. And we say hello world, this is new. And when you save, hot reload doesn't work until you hot restart, and then it's provided. Then this is why you need a notifier to notify your widget that something has changed. Okay, so we move on to the next one, which is the state provider. Over to state provider. On this page we have a simple widget that returns a scaffold and an app bar that says state provider example, and then we have a background color that we take a color, and we have for the body a container. The center says you should toggle color, and then we have a floating action button that when we click on it, it should toggle the color between red and blue, and this is working. So how did we use provider and Riverpod for this? Basically Riverpod, similar to the normal provider that we created the other time, you create a global string of color toggle provider of string type and returns an empty string. Also, I created another provider, string provider, that returns a string, but this time I'm doing a ref watch to watch this color provider for changes. So in case there is a change, it's going to watch it and then set the state of the color to red. Okay, so in my build context, I have a string of color that watches the color toggle provider for its state. So because we have set the state to red, it's going to set the color to red as well. So for the background color, I'm saying that if this color is equals to red, then you should set it to red, else you should set the color to be blue. Okay, so let's talk about this unpressed. Now we want to change the state of this color provider, and it means that once I click on the this floating action button, what it should do is to change the state from red to blue and also to red. So I'm saying that if the color here is red, the color toggle provider, if the state is red, it should set it to blue, else it should set it to red. And basically that's how it works, and if you click on it, it's going to toggle it as well. Okay, so basically that's what we have done for the state provider. So this is how you use your state provider. The next up is the stream provider, and this provider allows you to listen to a stream, and you can change the UI whenever the stream emits a new value. And look at stream as anything from a Firebase connection, or you're working with a socket, or you are connecting to a backend. Okay, so in this example, we are going to create a stream that emits numbers periodically. Then we will listen to that stream and then update our UI anytime it emits a new number. I've created a new file called number creator under a mix folder that we will use to create our stream. So we create a class called number creator and create a constructor for it. Let's call it number creator instead of creator. Okay, and in this constructor we are just going to use the timer from that async, and the periodic method is going to take a duration. So we are going to say we want you to tick for every second, and inside the timer we are going to do our logic. And so we are going to create a variable called count, and it's going to start at 1, and we are going to create a controller that will take a stream controller, and it's going to be of type integer. Yeah. Okay, so we are going to say a stream of int, and it's going to get a stream, and it's going to return the controller itself, the stream. Okay, so in this timer we are going to just call that controller, and we do .sync.add, and what are we adding? We are going to be adding count. And after we have added count, and we are just going to do count plus plus to increment the number of counts. Okay, so this is our stream that will be generating counts for every minute. Although we could do some little stuff on this, but we are not learning about stream, so we are just going to go over to this page and implement the stream using the stream provider. Let's create a stream provider. So first we create a final, and we are going to call it a number provider because it provides numbers from stream, and we are going to use the stream provider object. It's so we are going to do the auto import. I'm going to import. It has the auto dispose method, and we are going to pass string there, and we pass our ref, and it's going to return something, but here it's going to return an async. So let's go ahead and fix that. Okay, async. Yeah. Okay, so we are going to initialize our number creator, and so we are going to do number processor equals to let's say number creator equals to the number creator, and we are going to do that when we dispose our provider, then it should close the stream because we don't want it to keep and can we access the controller? No, so we'll probably go over here, and because we want to access that aside, so controller .sync.close. Okay, and we will also do an await for final value in the number creator, the stream, and then we want to say if the value is equals to 100, it should stop our stream. It should close our stream. So we are going to do number creator dot controller dot sync dot close. Okay, and else you are going to be yielding the value. Okay, so we just added a little check here that when the value gets to 100, just stop the stream and just close it. Now let's implement this provider that we have created in our UI and do our UI changes based on that. So we are going to do a consumer widget like we have thought before, and then we are going to put a scope reader and watch here. Okay, so in our build context, we are going to do number equals to watch, and it will be number provider. But now here is a problem. We can do a finer. We can do a finer, but instead we are going to use an async value, and the type is an integer. Okay, so in async value, so basically it comes with some utilities for managing streams, and you see, with an async value you can do .when it's loading. You can show a progress notification when there's an error. It will handle the error, and when there's a data you can use that as well. So async value is very important when you are working with streams or features in Riverpod. So, and it's used for manipulating asynchronous data. Okay, so we have gotten that out of the way. So we, in the body here, you can manipulate whatever you want to do. Now to show the data, we are just going to create a widget called the data widget. Maybe this is not a fancy name, and the argument will be of type async data, and we are going to return and the number dot, and you can see it has a couple of methods here, but we are going to use the when for our implementation. So when there is a data, we want it to, it's returning a number, so, and we are going to return a text that shows the number. Okay, there's a problem here. Okay, so we can do this and pass in the number straight up here using string interpolation, and for the loading we are just going to return a circular progress indicator. So when it is loading, it's going to show a circular progress indicator. For an error, and there are two arguments for the error and the stack itself to see the error. But for this tutorial, we are just going to return an error as occurred. Is that correct? Yeah, I think so. Okay, so here we are just going to pass in the data widget, and the argument will be the number that we created here. Now when we save this, we are probably going to see what happens next. Okay, so let's reload and then start and then do the stream provider. Okay, so you see the loading, and then it's counting 1, 2, 3. So each time it is emitting, it's automatically updating our UI here. Over to the next one, which is the feature provider. And how a feature provider works is similar to the stream provider, but instead of creating a stream, the provider creates a feature. Alright, and the way it works is similar to the feature builder that the widgets that and we have a screen for the feature provider, and what is happening here is a list of some to-do items that we are going to fetch from an API. Alright, I have created two files in our mix folder, and it is the api.dat which I have implemented and the to-do.dat which I have implemented as well. Now to get started, we are going to add a dependency for DO. DO allows you to do HTTP requests, and we are going to install the 3.0.10 version. And let's go ahead to see what we have done in the api.dart. This is the file that allows us to do our API calls. So we import DO here, and then we do a feature. I've created a class of to-do item, and we have the user ID title and completed, and then I did a JSON map, and to JSON map I actually don't need this, but what I have done is to convert the model using app.quicktype.io to create a model from the class. And for the so I have created a method called getData that returns a feature of to-do item, and then I did a try catch which returns a response, but then I have do.get, and I'll pass the path to it for the JSON placeholder. And the URL, I'm just going to grab it and then replace it here. Okay, so we are using a fake API to return a list of to-do item, feature of to-do item, and then we have to-do item here, and also okay, it's just a to-do item, not a list of to-do item. Okay, so once we have that, then we can go ahead to our feature provider. We have the screen, it has just a scaffold, and then the app bar here that says feature provider screen, and then it takes a body of container that has the height and the width, and then I padded it in all size by 20, and then the child is a lister. Now let's go ahead and create a provider that will expose our API to the user. Okay, so we are going to create a final to-do provider. We are just going to call it a to-do provider, and we are going to do equals to feature provider, and it's going to return a type of to-do item, and you know how we do it, and it's going to be on the sync. Yes. Now we are going to just return the API class, and we are just going to import that here. I am going to do a dot get data. Yes. Okay. Now we have that, and we are going to extend a consumer widget here, and also we are going to pass the scoped reader, and we call it watch. Okay, and since it works the same way with the stream provider, sorry, so we are going to use an async value that we used, and we are going to return a to-do item and to-do item, to do, yeah, and we are going to just call it call the watch method and passing the to do provider. Okay, and here we are going to just return a widget, and that will be the async value. So we are going to create a widget here and call it a data widget, and we are going to return, but here we are going to just do and pass the to do of type async value, and then we are going to do to do dot when. Okay, so for the data we are going to pass in the parameter data, and then we will return a list style here. So for the list style, and we are going to do a string interpolation, and it will be data dot the ID, and for the text here we are doing data dot the title. Okay, for the loading it's pretty straightforward. It will return a circular loading progress indicator, and for the error the same way, we are going to do the error and the stack, and it's going to return text of an error has occurred. And it wants us to close it. Okay, and we have done that. And for here for the child, we are just going to return the data, and we're passing it to do. Okay, so let's save that. Now it shows that an error has occurred, so that means we have an error and we need to figure out what the error is. Okay, so that will probably be in our API, and let's put a breakpoint here and see exactly what has happened when we call that. To fix the errors, we make some little modification to our API class by initializing the DO object itself here in the constructor, and then we are going to, instead of doing to do item, we are going to do to do item dot from JSON, and then we pass in the response dot data because it is a map. Also, we will modify this a little bit by removing all these external methods, and we have a cleaner class for our to do item. Okay, and if we go to our feature provider, I think we are good to go. So let's run this again. Okay, it has worked. Let's refresh this, and you see the circular, and then it loads. The circular is a little big, so we are going to wrap it with the center, and then reload it again, and click on the feature, and we are good to go. Now when I close the screen and run it again, the feature it doesn't load it again. Now to auto dispose, you can pass in the auto dispose method, and when I close the screen, I pop up the screen, it's going to dispose that provider. And let's run this, and then you have, when I click on it, you see it loads, and when I pop and click on it again, it loads that all over again. So it auto disposes your provider. So that's what you need the auto dispose for. Now let's talk about notifiers in Riverpod. There are two types of notifiers, and they are the ChangeNotifier Provider and the StateNotifier Provider. but preferably you should use the StateNotifier Provider over the ChangeNotifier Provider, because there are downsides to the ChangeNotifier Provider, because its data is mutable. That means you can access and overwrite it from anywhere, and it's also dependent on notifying listeners. So imagine if your project grows, you'll be having to call notified listeners everywhere. Okay, so because we are not advising for the ChangeNotifier Provider, we are just going to create a simple counter app for this. So let's click on this, and how it works is once I click on the plus, the number here will increment. So let's create a counter class, and I'll call it class counter, and it's going to extend the ChangeNotifier. The ChangeNotifier Provider uses the ChangeNotifier, so also is the StateNotifier. So we'll initialize a count, and then we'll create a constructor that sets the count to 0, the initial count to 0, and then we have an increment method of void, and what it means is that we are going to increment count, and here you will notify your listeners that the value of count has changed, and this is void. Okay, now that is the counter class. Now let's go over to the ChangeNotifier page, and we will write the provider, and it will be counter provider equals to the ChangeNotifier Provider, and it will be a class of counter. You will pass in a class of counter, and it wants us to import that, and you will have your ref, which returns a new counter. Okay. Now let's set the value of our count, and by string interpolation. Also, before we go over, let's use our consumer widget here, which is standard, and then we will do the scope reader on watch. Okay. Scope reader, not scope reader, and then we will do a final count, which we will watch the counter provider. Now there's the count. Okay, so in this counter there's a count, so we just do the count, and then we have count dot to string, because count is an integer. Now for the onPress, we want to modify the data here, so we are going to call this increment from our UI here. So we just do a context. There's an extension method called read here, which we mean we pass in our provider, which is the counter provider, and then we have access to the increment method. Okay, so the initial count is 0, and once we hit this, it counts. Yeah. Now the next one is the StateNotifier Provider, which will be the last one we see on this series. For the last notifier, we are going to create a file here called the StateNotifier to do the dart, and here we are going to just load a list of to-dos, check if a to-do is completed or not, and with this button we are going to add a to-do. Now we already have the to-do class here, and which is the to-do item, so let's go ahead and create. So we are going to call the class to-do list, and it's going to extend our StateNotifier, which is here, and we are going to make it of type list of to-do item. Yes. And then we have a to-do list constructor, which we will do a list of to-do, and then we call to-dos. And then for the super constructor, we are going to have to-dos, and if there are no to-dos, it's make it empty, so this will be to-do item. Okay, now we can start writing the methods and change the state. That we change the state of the to-do, each item in the to-dos. So we can do a void, and it will be add. So let's add, and let's say we want to add a new to-do. We pass in a title, and then we will change the state. We have access to the state, and changes the state will mean we are still maintaining the state, and then we have a new to-do item, which we will we are going to put in the user ID. It's going to remain the same, and int ID, that will be ID. Then we say the state dot length +1. That means we are incrementing the ID, and then the title will be the title of the string. Okay, and I think we are good. How about the user ID? For the user ID, let's do the same thing here. State equals to length +1 to have different user IDs. Okay, so that is for the add. So we will have another method called toggle, and for the toggle we're passing the ID to be able to know which to-do we want to toggle. And we have the state equals to, for each item in the to-do, for each to-do in the to-do list, we are going to say if the to-do dot ID is equals to the ID that we passed, then do then do the to-do, then modify the to-do item, and for the ID you just go to do to-do.id, and then for completed you are going to change it, and for the title, so you are going to do to-do.title, and for the user ID the same thing, to-do.user ID. Else just the to-do, and we are good to go. Okay, so that is for the to-do and the toggle. And so we have this. I think that completes our method. Now we can go ahead to implement this on the front and write a provider for the StateNotifier Provider. So in summary, what you have done is to create a simple to-do class that we have here, and then we created this StateNotifier that has the add and toggle method. So once we click here, it's going to add a new it's going to add a new item, and then the toggle if you want to say it's completed or it's not. Okay, so for the state notifier, we are just going to create a simple provider at the top, and it's going to be a final to do lists provider. We are going to call the StateNotifier Provider object, and it's going to be return to do lists. Okay, now we are going to do a consumer widget, and we are going to pass put in the scope reader and the watch, and also we are going to call a final to do lists equals to watch to do list provider dot state. Okay, so we are good to go, and to be able to show the list of to do here, so we are going to just do a for loop, and here we are going to return a list view, and for the list view it has children, that is a list. So we are going to do for final to do in to do lists, then we want you to return for each item in to do list, you want you to return this, and for the text it will be to do the title, and for the unchanged we have value, which for the unchanged has a callback that that returns a new value, you see. So it returns a boolean value, and we take that value and use the read method and pass in the provider, which is the to-do list provider, and we have access to the toggle, and then we pass the ID, that will be to-do.id. Now for the value here, we will just be to-do.completed if it is true or not. Okay, so now we don't have anything to do because it's empty. So for the unpressed, we here so that we want to be adding a new to do, and what we are going to do is we are going to do a context.read and then call the add method. So we have context.read was the provider, to do list provider, that is the add method that we created, and then we pass a title, which is we can call it new to do, and that is it. So okay, so we have a little error here that says our try state is not. So let's see why that is a problem. To fix that error, we will go back to our state notifier to do, and the problem is we did not pass in the completed argument there, and so we will pass in a default argument which for completed, and we are going to set it as false. Okay, and if we reload and try our StateNotifier again. Once we add a new item, it comes over there, and we can toggle, and that is quite alright and okay. So you can go ahead and modify this and also add a delete. Once I click on something here, it will delete the item, which we can do. It will delete and remove, and let's implement that method. So we can do void remove, and we'll pass in the ID, and we will set the states to be state.where sudo id is not equals to id, the id that we are passing, and to list. Okay, so that is the remove method, and we can have something here that will a button that will when we click, we will remove that item from the list. So go ahead and implement that. So if you go here, you can add another button to remove and each one, and then you just call the context that read the provider dot remove, and then you pass the ID of the to do and it's going to remove. So you're probably going to do it around here, which works. Okay, so here we have come to the end of all the providers and notifiers that Riverpod provides, and I hope that you have been able to learn how Riverpod works, and I hope that you'll be able to use it in your project, because Riverpod works cool and works great for me. So we have been able to see all the different providers that we have used so far, and everything works. So if you want to look into the code, you can go to the link in the description for the GitHub URL, and you can clone and play around with it, improve on the code. And you can reach me also on Twitter and my social network and on LinkedIn. Also, if you like this video, please do like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that I'll be able to upload more of this video in future. Thank you. Bye bye.